Thanks for babysitting my son during spring break.
I was stunned when my sister suddenly showed up at my house. What are you talking about? The next moment, shock hit me.
I left him in the backyard shed.
I rushed there, trembling with fear. When I hurriedly opened the shed door, a stench I had never encountered before hit me. What is this smell? And then an awful sight unfolded before my eyes. I could do nothing but shiver in despair. I'm Hannah. I'm a 36-year-old part-time teacher at the local high school. My husband, Steve, is an ordinary and diligent office worker. He's very kind, helping with chores around the house. Both of my parents have already passed away, and we don't have kids, so it's just the two of us living in my childhood home. When I said I wanted to live in the house where I grew up, he agreed without hesitation. Surrounded by fields, it was very quiet, and our life itself was peaceful. It's a place that means a lot to me. But lately, our peaceful life has become very noisy. I have a younger sister, Amy, who's a year younger than me, and she's been a real problem. You're here again?
Come on, what's the big deal? Aren't you happy to see Dave? He's your adorable nephew, right?
My sister is a stay-at-home mom and lives nearby with her husband, Mike, and their 8-year-old son, Dave. And ever since Mike was transferred and had to live away from home 6 months ago, Amy has been dropping by our place constantly. She claims that she feels more comfortable at my place, but that's a complete lie. She just dumps her son on me and heads out to have fun. My nephew Dave is a serious, smart, and dependable 8-year-old like his dad, Mike. He even has his own cell phone, which he uses so skillfully. It's hard to believe he's just 8. That's impressive. Did your mom buy that for you?
Dad got it for me secretly without telling Mom.
When Dave unzipped his small bag to put away his phone, I noticed he had packed apples and bananas. I thought Amy had given them to him, but he explained that he brought them himself so he wouldn't be a bother. While I'm impressed by how smart he is, seeing how apologetic he looks whenever Amy drops him off makes me feel uneasy. And yet, Amy,
Take care of him today, too.
she says this without a care and then heads off, leaving Dave behind. Hey, you need to stop this. You're his mom. It's not fair to Dave. The visits became so frequent that I had to give Amy a stern warning, but her behavior only got worse. Whenever there was school holiday, she'd just assume I was off work and leave Dave with me without asking. Even though I told her I had coaching duties and couldn't handle it, she wouldn't listen at all.
Fine, I'll ask Steve to take care of him then.
She even said things like that. Steve's tired from work too, so don't do that.
Well then, I'm counting on you, Hannah.
Since Amy is my sister, Steve finds it hard to be firm with her. Plus, he likes kids and probably feels sorry for Dave. So, whenever I'm at work, he willingly takes care of Dave. But the kinder Steve is, the guiltier I feel toward him.
I'll go home. I can manage on my own.
Maybe sensing the tension, Dave would say things like that, but there's no way I could leave an 8-year-old by himself.
I'm sorry, Aunt Hannah.
Why are you apologizing? I'm happy to have you here, Dave.
Mom doesn't like me.
That's not true. Even though I tried to reassure him, Dave's expression remained gloomy. Seeing his face made my heart ache, and I couldn't help but feel angry at Amy for making her child feel this way. But Amy had no regard for how I or Dave felt. It became routine for her to leave Dave with us and not come back until late at night. I was getting more and more frustrated, but I felt trapped by Amy's behavior, knowing that scolding her wouldn't do any good. Days went by in a haze. Then, the day before the school spring break started, I got a call from Amy.
Hannah, school's out tomorrow, right? Can you take care of Dave for about a week?
Here we go again. I sighed. But what kind of situation would make a mom leave her kid for a whole week? No way. I've told you before, even when the students are off, teachers still have to work. And for a whole week? Are you going into the hospital or something? I asked, genuinely worried.
No way. I'm totally fine. It's just that I have something I absolutely can't miss.
Amy's voice on the phone sounded cheerful, almost like she couldn't hide her excitement. But when I asked what this something was, she just laughed it off. I immediately guessed it was something frivolous. Sorry, like I said, I can't do it. I'm going on a trip with the school team for a week starting tomorrow. I thought she'd finally give up hearing that.
If that's the case, I'll ask Steve to look after him.
Don't be ridiculous. He has work too, and he's going on a 2-week business trip starting tomorrow. So, we can't take care of Dave.
What's that supposed to mean? Are your trip and his business more important than Dave?
I could say the exact same thing to you. What's impossible is impossible. Give up this time. Frustrated with Amy's selfish logic, I ended the conversation in a stern tone and abruptly hung up. She's got to understand now, right? But I underestimated Amy. I didn't realize just how naive I was being until later. A week later, I returned home after the school trip. It had been a fun and enriching experience for the students, but for the teachers, it was a week filled with responsibilities and mental exhaustion. And even though it was early spring, the weather had been unusually hot, leaving me drained both physically and mentally. Well, that was rough. I collapsed onto the sofa, tossing my bags aside. But just then, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, there stood Amy. I thought she might have brought Dave again, but she was alone for a change.
Thanks for babysitting Dave during spring break.
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. You were looking after Dave, right?
I suddenly remembered the phone call with Amy from a week ago, but I was sure I had refused her request back then. I stared at Amy, baffled, trying to figure out what she was talking about. And then the shocking truth came out.
I left Dave in the backyard shed. Didn't you see the note on the door?
What?
Come on, stop joking around. I've been busy. Where is Dave? Is he taking a nap or something?
She glanced around toward the back room and noticed my suitcase still lying around.
What's this? What's going on? Don't tell me you actually went on that trip?
Yeah, I went. It was for work.
What? You've got to be kidding me. I told you to look after Dave, and you went on a trip. That's just unbelievable. Dave is more important than work, right?
Listening to Amy's furious rant, I was deeply shaken. I rushed outside and headed to the backyard. There, an old shed stood, built before I was even born. As a kid, I used to play treasure hunts inside with my friends. But now it was just full of old junk. Since my parents passed away, I rarely went in there. And just as Amy said, there was a note stuck to the shed door that read,
Dave's in here. Take care of him. The key is back in place, so no worries.
"What the?" Did you really lock Dave in here?
Yeah, just like the note says.
Why would you do such a thing? I told you I'd be away for a week on a school trip. I was trembling with anger as I glared at Amy, raising my voice.
I told you I had something I absolutely couldn't miss.
Apparently, when Amy came to drop off Dave, she assumed I'd be back right away, even though I had already left for the trip. She said that because she forgot her house key, she put Dave in the shed and locked him in so he couldn't get out. Since there wasn't anything valuable to steal, the shed key was always left inside a bag hanging on the outer wall. I picked it up, trembling, and quickly opened the door. No. The moment I did, a terrible stench came from inside. The smell was so bad it made me hesitate for a moment before entering the shed. Holding my breath, I peeked inside cautiously, but nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Dave? I called out softly, but there was no reply. Covering my nose with my sleeve, I forced myself to step inside. No way. And then I found the source of the stench and screamed in shock. It seemed Amy sensed something was wrong with my reaction.
Hey, if something happens to Dave, it's all your fault, you know. I'm not to blame at all.
With that, Amy turned around and ran away. Hey, wait! Panicked by the shocking sight and Amy's irresponsibility for leaving me alone, I was on the verge of losing my composure. What should I do? Just then, my phone rang in my pocket, bringing unexpected news. 2 hours later, I called Amy. Thanks for what you did earlier. How could you just leave me after pulling such a stunt?
Who's the bad one here? You're the one who left Dave behind to go to work. Anyway,
She started spewing out her self-serving arguments like a machine gun, showing no signs of regret. Enough. I don't have time for this. Come over right now. We need to talk about Dave's funeral arrangements. Hearing my words, she gasped audibly over the phone. But that moment of surprise quickly faded.
fine. But just so you know, I'll never forgive you. You better be ready to pay for this.
With that, she hung up the phone. That's my line. I've held back long enough, but I won't anymore. Fueled by the intense anger welling up inside me, I prepared myself for a final showdown for Dave's sake. An hour later, Amy arrived. Where have you been hiding all this time?
I wasn't hiding.
How can you act so smug after everything you caused?
It's your fault for going on that trip. It's not my fault at all.
Even as I confronted her at the door, she showed no remorse and barged into the house as if nothing had happened. But the moment she opened the living room door, she suddenly turned around and bolted out the door. Hey, wait! Before I could shout, someone else ran out of the living room and quickly caught up to her. Thanks, Mike. That person was Mike, Amy's husband. After I told him about Dave, he had rushed back from his work assignment. With a sulky look, Amy slumped and reluctantly returned to the living room, sitting down in front of us. Do you realize what you've done? Your irresponsibility, Amy, caused something terrible. You hurt Dave.
Huh? Don't blame me. You're the one who ignored my request.
That doesn't mean you can lock a child in a shed. Do you have any idea how Dave must have felt?
What's wrong with that? At least the shed kept him out of the rain and wind. It's better than leaving him outside, right?
Though Amy had quieted down for a moment when Mike arrived, she quickly reverted to her defiant attitude. I was shocked by just how self-centered she was. but this was within my expectations. I decided to change my approach. By the way, where exactly have you been for the past week while you left Dave alone at my house? This question clearly struck a nerve with Amy, as her expression immediately stiffened. Oh, you look a little pale. What's the matter? I mean, you can't exactly admit you were on a romantic trip with some guy, right? With that, I held up my phone in front of Amy, who had gone from confident to speechless. On the screen was a picture of Amy walking arm in arm with a young man I didn't recognize near her neighborhood.
No, he's just a college friend.
Oh, really? You do that with a college friend? As I swiped through the photos, I even came across images of them passionately kissing in public.
Well, we just ran into each other, decided to grab a drink to celebrate. I got drunk and lost control. Nothing more than that happened.
Oh, really? But I also have audio recordings. When I played the audio on my phone, the voices of a man and a woman came through.
I can't wait for the trip.
My son's on spring break, so I'm leaving him with my sister.
The woman's voice was unmistakably Amy's. Well, there's no more denying it now. Must be nice, huh? Using Mike's absence to lock your son in a shed while you went on an affair trip.
No way. That's not my voice.
Stop lying. If that's true, then why did you run away the moment you saw Mike? You must have something to hide. Faced with the evidence and my relentless questioning, Amy started to tremble uncontrollably. Yet even then, she refused to admit the truth.
This is all a setup. You made fake evidence just to cover up for leaving Dave in that shed.
What? What are you even saying? I just got back from the school trip. I didn't have time to make any of this.
Well then, it must have been Steve. He works in IT, right? He could whip up something like this in no time.
Stop talking nonsense. I told you my husband's on a 2-week business trip.
So what? He could have sent the data remotely. He didn't need to come back to make this.
Exasperated by her stubbornness, I sighed deeply. Hey, Amy, do you know whose phone this is?
Whose else? It's yours, right?
No, actually, this is Dave's phone.
That's ridiculous. There's no way it's Dave's. I never gave him a phone.
Amy laughed mockingly, looking triumphant. But that look wouldn't last long. If you're so sure, why don't we ask him directly?
What?
I called down the hallway. You can come in now. And the living room door slowly opened. Standing there was none other than my nephew, Dave.
Dave. Why? I thought you were dead.
That's not the case. Amy was utterly shocked to see that Dave was alive. It was as if she had seen a ghost. You look confused. Let me explain it so you understand, Amy. Dave had been left in the shed by his mom with the promise that I would come to pick him up. Scared and alone, he tried everything he could to open the door, pushing and pulling, but it wouldn't budge. Naturally, since Amy had locked it. He then searched for another way out and found a small window high up. Using an old chair nearby as a step, he grabbed onto the window ledge and climbed up. Fortunately, the window wasn't rusted, so even with Dave's strength, it opened easily. After escaping through the window, he walked 15 miles to his aunt's house. His sudden arrival shocked her. When she learned what happened, she tried to call me immediately, but Dave stopped her. Apparently, he had overheard our phone conversation and knew I was on a school trip. He didn't want to interrupt my work, so he convinced his aunt to wait. And then, on the day I returned from the trip, the aunt called me and brought Dave here.
So, why did you lie about his funeral? That's such a cruel trick.
Well, if I hadn't, you wouldn't have shown up, right? And honestly, if Dave had stayed in that shed, I might have actually been planning a funeral right now.
Wait a minute. Then what was that awful smell? You screamed so loud back then.
Oh, that? I was just startled by finding a dead bird. The source of the terrible smell when I opened the shed door turned out to be a decaying bird. According to Mike, it had probably gotten in through the window Dave used to escape, injured itself, and died inside. The unusually warm spring temperatures had caused it to decompose quickly.
No way. So, you're saying Dave took those photos and recordings?
Realizing that Dave had been given a phone by his dad, Amy's face turned pale with shock.
Dave, what are you trying to do to your mom by doing this?
Dave seemed to be frightened by her words and quickly hid behind me. Seeing this, Amy got angry and threw the TV remote at Dave. "What do you think you're doing?"
Shut up. It's his fault for betraying me like this.
She then grabbed a teacup from the table and tried to throw it at Dave. "Stop it." I grabbed her arm and took it away from her.
What are you doing? Let go of me.
"Amy, do you have any idea how Dave has been feeling? Abandoned by his own mom, locked in a shed, and even now, you're only thinking about yourself."
Shut up. What would you know? You've never even had kids.
"I don't want to hear that from someone like you, Amy. You're not fit to be a mother." As I harshly scolded Amy, she resisted. It was Mike who finally put a stop to our escalating argument. He pulled out a divorce paper from the bag he had with him and handed it to Amy.
A divorce paper? This is ridiculous.
But Mike's expression was dead serious. And rightfully so. Fooling around with another guy, neglecting your child. Of course, Mike wouldn't expect his wife to be cheating while he was away. Neglecting Dave just to spend time with her affair partner was completely unacceptable, even as a human being. How could you live such a disgraceful life? Now, go to the police station and think long and hard about what you've done. Just then, we heard the sound of police sirens approaching in the distance. "I called the police before you got here, Amy. I told them everything you did to Dave."
No, that can't be true.
"Think about what you've done and regret it." Suddenly, Amy's face turned downward, and she began to mutter something under her breath, seemingly in shock. But that moment didn't last long.
I didn't do anything wrong. It's all their fault. This is ridiculous.
"What?" The next moment, she snapped and lifted a nearby chair, aiming to throw it at me.
No.
But then,
Whoa.
Amy was thrown forcefully to the ground by Mike, landing hard on the floor with a pained expression. At that moment, Dave, who had been standing behind me, walked over to his mom.
Goodbye.
And with a cold expression I had never seen before, he spoke those words. "This is the price you pay for living so selfishly. You have nothing left now, no place to live, no one to rely on."
Silence.
Amy, restrained by Mike, stared into space with a vacant look in her eyes. "And from today, I'm cutting ties with you. You're no longer my family or my sister. Don't ever show yourself in front of us again."
No, Hannah. Please, don't abandon me.
"No, that's not going to happen."
No way. I'm sorry.
She sobbed and apologized, but considering everything that had happened, there was no way I could forgive her. Think about your actions for the rest of your life.
No.
A few minutes later, the police arrived. As we watched, Amy was taken away in the police car. Afterward, she was arrested for neglecting her child. She divorced Mike, had to pay $20,000 in alimony and $30,000 in child support, lost custody of Dave to Mike, and even after her release, she had nowhere to go. Her affair partner was also found by the police thanks to my information, and he was arrested for turning a blind eye to the neglect, despite knowing what was happening. Mike also sued the affair partner for $10,000 in damages. It's said that he is now working multiple jobs to pay off the debt. As for me, I'm living a peaceful life with my husband. We demolished the old shed and started a home garden together. Since then, Dave, now living with his dad and grandparents after Mike's return from his assignment, often comes over to our house, happily helping us out. I'm determined to keep watching over him closely from now on.